A karate master decided to showcase his skills by attacking a royal guard. What happened next shocked everyone. You won't believe how this story ends. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, and let's promote respect for the Royal Guard together. Let the whole world see how many of us there are. London basked in the glow of the midday sun, and Buckingham Palace stood majestically against a clear blue sky. The square in front of the palace was alive with excitement. Tourists clicked away on their cameras, children laughed, and guides regaled eager listeners with stories of British royalty. Everything seemed perfect, until a subtle tension began to ripple through the air. Jack Randall was the source of that tension, standing out in the crowd like a dark shadow on a sunny day. The 35-year-old man had an aura of cockiness about him. His close-cropped dark hair, piercing grey eyes, and muscular build gave him an imposing presence. His tight athletic shirt accentuated his physique, making him look more like a competitor in a fighting arena than a tourist. In one hand, he toyed with a water bottle, flipping it casually to draw attention to himself. Jack was a former karate champion from the United States, and he had come to London to witness the legendary British discipline. But instead of being impressed, Jack saw the guards as easy targets, fodder for his sharp tongue and inflated ego. "Look at these guys," Jack sneered, his voice cutting through the general murmur of the crowd. "Statues in uniform, that's all they are." Several heads turned toward him, their owners frowning in disapproval. But Jack wasn't deterred. In fact, he thrived on the attention. "Jack, come on, relax," one of his friends said nervously, trying to de-escalate the situation. "It's just a ceremony." "A ceremony?" Jack smirked, turning his gaze toward the nearest guard. "Please, I could take all of them down with one punch. Bet they don't even know how to fight." His words sparked murmurs among the onlookers, some of whom began to edge away from him. Others discreetly raised their phones, sensing that something extraordinary or disastrous was about to unfold. For you, a free like is easy, but for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me one like and one subscription? Thank you very much. At his post, not far from where Jack was standing, was Richard Hunt, a tall, composed royal guard. His crimson tunic and gleaming gold buttons shone under the sun, while his iconic bearskin cap added to his commanding presence. Richard's face was stoic, his gaze fixed straight ahead, seemingly oblivious to the man taunting him. Yet, a slight tightening of his jawline betrayed his heightened awareness. Years of training had taught Richard not to respond to provocations, no matter how blatant. Rule number 1, stay disciplined. Jack's sharp eyes locked onto Richard. There was something about the guard's unyielding composure that fueled his need to provoke further. "Watch this," Jack said to his friends, leaning in with a sly grin. "I'm about to give them a show." The crowd around them began to sense the rising tension and instinctively created a wider berth around Jack and Richard. Tourists whispered to one another, their voices tinged with anticipation and unease. Phones were held higher, recording the scene as it unfolded. Richard, standing tall and silent, maintained his position despite the looming confrontation. "Hey, you!" Jack shouted, stepping closer to the barrier. His voice echoed across the square. "Are you even alive, or are you just part of the scenery?" Richard didn't flinch. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon, his expression unchanging. But Jack took the lack of reaction as a challenge. "I'll bet $100 you won't even flinch if I take a swing at you," Jack declared loudly, laughing as he turned to his friends. His taunt drew a louder reaction from the crowd, which buzzed with a mix of outrage and apprehension. "This is going too far," an older woman whispered, clutching the arm of a younger couple beside her. "Someone needs to stop him," a man in a suit muttered, holding his phone steady to capture the unfolding drama. But no one stepped in. Jack's towering physique and aggressive demeanor kept everyone at a distance. Meanwhile, Richard remained the epitome of calm. though his icy stare seemed to sharpen as he watched Jack close the distance. Emboldened by the silence of both the guard and the crowd, Jack took another step forward. His grin widened into a predatory smile. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" he jeered, leaning over the barrier. "Let's see how unshakable you really are." The air grew thick with tension, each passing second feeling like an eternity. The crowd collectively held its breath, sensing that a critical moment was imminent. Jack, basking in the spotlight of his self-created spectacle, leaned in even closer, his voice dropping to a taunting whisper. "Well, are you ready to lose that cool facade?" For Richard, maintaining his composure wasn't just about discipline. It was about honor. Beneath his stoic exterior, his instincts sharpened, preparing him for whatever might come next. And for the crowd, the scene before them felt like the calm before an explosive storm. The square in front of Buckingham Palace was engulfed in a tense stillness. The usual hum of tourist chatter faded, giving way to an oppressive silence, interrupted only by Jack Randall's voice, emerging from the crowd like a predator searching for prey. Jack's confident, almost theatrical movements made it clear he was there for a performance. "Hey, soldier boy," he shouted, stepping closer to the barrier. His sharp, booming voice echoed off the palace walls. "Show me what you've got, or are you just a decoration on this square?" The crowd tensed. People whispered among themselves, and several quickly pulled out their phones to record what was unfolding. Jack noticed the tourists' eyes locking onto him, and a self-satisfied smirk spread across his face. He thrived on attention, relishing every moment of the spotlight. Nearby stood Richard Hunt, a tall, imposing guardsman who epitomized royal discipline. His crimson tunic gleamed in the sunlight, and his tall bearskin hat accentuated his commanding stature. Despite the unfolding drama, Richard's face remained stoic, but behind the calm facade he could feel the tension building. This tourist was crossing a line. "You can't hear me, huh?" Jack taunted, taking a step closer to the barrier. His piercing grey eyes bore into Richard, his voice dripping with mockery. "Or maybe you can't move without someone giving you an order." Richard stood firm, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His breathing remained steady, but his muscles were taut. Every second of silence only added fuel to the fire. The crowd was beginning to split into factions. Some whispered to one another, concerned that Jack might go too far. Others, visibly annoyed, quietly voiced their disapproval. "This is unacceptable," muttered an elderly man in a hat, standing beside a young couple. "Someone needs to stop him," the woman replied, clutching her partner's arm. But Jack paid no attention to their remarks. He was immersed in his own show. His friends, standing a short distance away, exchanged nervous glances. One of them, a tall man in a sports jacket, tried to intervene. "Jack, that's enough. This is the Royal Guard. They take their duty seriously. You're about to cross a line." Jack just laughed, brushing off the warning. "Relax. They're not going to do anything. They're just part of the tourist attraction." With that, he stepped over the barrier. The crowd collectively gasped, as if the air had been sucked out of their lungs. Jack raised his hands and assumed a fighting stance. His pose was sharp, confident, a clear display of his skill and physical prowess. He executed a few quick shadow punches, the strikes slicing through the air. "Watch and learn," he announced loudly to the crowd. "I'll show you how real defense works." The crowd was frozen. Some watched with horror. Others couldn't look away, sensing the situation was spiraling toward an unpredictable outcome. Some recorded the scene, while others shouted, "Stop this! This isn't the place for your antics!" But Jack was fully absorbed in his performance. His shouts echoed across the square, and his movements grew more exaggerated and provocative. "Guardsmen, get ready!" he yelled, lunging forward. Richard stood like a stone statue, his gaze still fixed ahead. The tension around him was palpable. The crowd, struck dumb by the spectacle, seemed to hold its collective breath. On the square, Only the sound of pounding hearts and the faint rustle of the breeze broke the eerie silence. Only Jack seemed to know, or believe he knew, what would happen next. The square in front of Buckingham Palace was thick with tension. Every eye was fixed on Jack Randall, whose arrogance had reached its zenith. His movements were sharper now, his voice louder, cutting through the still air. "Well, mannequin, it's time for you to move," Jack jeered, throwing a few quick punches in Richard's direction. Richard's expression didn't change, not even a twitch, but his icy stare seemed to carry an unspoken warning. It was the gaze of someone trained to remain calm under pressure, but prepared for anything. Jack, basking in the crowd's attention, grinned even wider. He thrived on the cameras pointed at him, relishing the spotlight. His friends stood off to the side, whispering nervously. "This is too much," muttered one of them, a tall man wearing a baseball cap. "He's really going too far." But Jack wasn't listening. He was caught up in his own bravado, completely enthralled by his antics. "All right, if you won't move, I'll show you what a real attack looks like," he shouted, stepping forward with a dramatic flourish. It all happened in a fraction of a second. Jack lunged forward, aiming a high kick at Richard's shoulder. The crowd gasped, and someone even screamed, "Stop him!" Before Jack could complete his strike, Richard reacted with lightning speed. The guardsman stepped to the side with military precision, simultaneously catching Jack's leg mid-air. The movement was fluid, practiced, and devastatingly effective. The crowd erupted. Some clapped in astonishment, while others shouted in disbelief. People couldn't comprehend how the stoic guardsman had so quickly transformed into a disciplined combatant. Jack lost his balance. His eyes widened in shock. His self-assured smirk was replaced by an expression of pure disbelief. He tried to pull away, but Richard used his momentum against him. With a swift, controlled motion, the guardsman sent Jack sprawling to the ground. Jack hit the pavement with a dull thud, his palms instinctively bracing his fall. His arrogance shattered alongside his balance. Richard resumed his original stance, his back straight and his gaze once again fixed on the horizon. It was as if nothing had happened. The crowd buzzed with energy. Some shouted words of admiration. "Incredible! He didn't even flinch. Now that's professionalism." Others were still reeling from the shock. "Is he a trained fighter? How did he do that?" Jack scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with humiliation. He stared at Richard, struggling to comprehend how the guardsman had turned the tables so effortlessly. His voice faltered as he muttered, You didn't even warn me." But his words were lost in the roar of the crowd. Richard remained silent, his face unchanging, but his unyielding gaze seemed to convey a single message. "Don't try that again." The crowd continued to buzz with excitement. One bystander shouted, "That's what you get, idiot! Don't mess with the guards!" Jack, seemingly deaf to the commotion, turned to his friends. His pride was in tatters, but he still didn't grasp the full extent of the fallout that was yet to come. The square in front of Buckingham Palace erupted with emotions. The crowd, which had initially observed Jack's antics with curiosity and confusion, transformed into a seething mix of condemnation and excitement. As soon as Richard skillfully brought Jack to the ground, people began clapping and shouting their support for the guard. "Now that's what I'm talking about," someone from the front row yelled. "That's professionalism. Take notes," another added. Still lying on the pavement, Jack looked dazed and humiliated. His pride, along with his athletic reputation, had been shattered in front of dozens of onlookers. He quickly tried to salvage the situation, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "This is a misunderstanding. I was just joking. You all took it the wrong way." His voice trembled, but the crowd wasn't buying it. Amid the murmurs and exclamations, 2 royal security officers emerged from behind the barriers. Leading them was a tall, stern-looking man in his 40s, with a perfectly straight posture and a piercing, assessing gaze. His grey suit was immaculate, emphasizing his official authority. Behind him walked a younger officer, holding a radio and scanning the scene. The crowd fell silent, instinctively making way for the officers, as though understanding that justice was about to be served. Jack, still on the ground and trying to stand, locked eyes with the lead officer. The man wasn't visibly angry. His expressionless face was far more intimidating. As he reached Jack, he leaned slightly forward and, with an icy calm, said, "Sir, you have just assaulted a member of the Royal Guard on duty. You are under arrest." The officer's words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The crowd gasped, then erupted into cheers and applause. "Serves him right. Disgraceful. Respect the Royal Guard." Jack's face turned pale. He stammered, raising his hands as if trying to plead his innocence. "I didn't mean it. It was a joke, just a demonstration. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone." The officers ignored his excuses. The younger officer stepped forward, producing handcuffs with practiced efficiency. He swiftly cuffed Jack's wrists, immobilizing him. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law," the lead officer said, delivering the standard warning with crisp precision, leaving Jack no room for protest. The crowd encircled the scene, maintaining a respectful distance, but growing louder with their remarks. "This should be a lesson. Respect the traditions, or go back home." Phones were raised high, capturing every moment of the arrest. Jack, who had previously relished the attention, now found himself trapped by it. His face betrayed a mixture of despair and humiliation that no amount of confidence or physical prowess could conceal. "Listen, it was just a joke. I'll apologize." Jack tried shouting over the commotion, but his words were drowned out by the growing noise of the crowd. The officers wasted no time lifting him to his feet and escorting him toward a waiting patrol car parked nearby. The crowd parted, forming a narrow pathway as Jack was led away. His face was red with embarrassment, his eyes desperately avoiding the many lenses capturing his every step. "This isn't your karate ring," a woman in the crowd shouted. "You'll see, they don't mess around with people like you," added an older man, filming the scene on his phone. Jack gave up trying to justify himself. His head hung low as the officers led him away. Behind him were the heated murmurs of tourists, phone cameras clicking, and Richard Hunt, the very guard Jack had tried to humiliate. Richard stood silent throughout the ordeal, maintaining his perfect stance. His expression remained calm, but a flicker of cold determination still burned in his eyes. His bright red tunic, glistening under the sunlight, now stood as a symbol of honor that no one could tarnish. That day served as a stark lesson for everyone. The Royal Guard is not just a tourist attraction, but a representation of strength, dignity, and discipline, qualities that cannot be challenged without consequence. Barely an hour had passed since the incident when the video of Jack's fall at the hands of the Royal Guard flooded social media. Footage showing the former karate champion being swiftly outmaneuvered by the Guard went viral almost instantly. Subscribers and journalists alike shared the clips, fueling widespread discussion. "This is incredible. That Guard is a true professional," read one of the first comments. "He should have known better. The Royal Guard is no joke," wrote another. Across platforms from Facebook to TikTok, the video was accompanied by sharp hashtags: "Respect Traditions," "Guard vs. Karate Champion," "Tourist Fail." The discussion quickly spread beyond the internet. Newspapers and news channels picked up the story, incorporating the footage into their broadcasts with headlines such as "Tourist Challenges Guard and Faces Defeat," or "How a Reckless Stunt Brought Shame to a Former Champion." Barely an hour had passed since the incident when the video of Jack's fall at the hands of the Royal Guard flooded social media. Footage showing the former karate champion being swiftly outmaneuvered by the Guard went viral almost instantly. Subscribers and journalists alike shared the clips, fueling widespread discussion. "This is incredible. That Guard is a true professional," read one of the first comments. He should have known better. The Royal Guard is no joke, wrote another. Across platforms from Facebook to TikTok, the video was accompanied by sharp hashtags: respect traditions, guard versus karate champion, tourist fail. The discussion quickly spread beyond the internet. Newspapers and news channels picked up the story, incorporating the footage into their broadcasts with headlines such as "Tourist challenges guard and faces defeat," or "How a reckless stunt brought shame to a former champion." Under pressure from his legal team and the overwhelming public backlash, Jack issued a formal apology the next day. A camera captured him seated at a table, wearing a stiff suit and sporting a tense expression. "I want to apologize to the Royal Guard, to Richard Hunt, and to the entire country for my reckless actions," he said, looking directly into the camera. "It was a foolish and disrespectful stunt, and I deeply regret what I did." But viewers weren't quick to forgive. "Now he's sorry? A little too late for that," one commenter wrote. "An apology? It's meaningless. He should face the consequences," added another. While Jack's apology felt like a forced gesture to many, the image of Richard Hunt, the stoic and disciplined guard, became a beacon of honor. His composure and swift reaction drew widespread admiration. Now that is what a true professional looks like. Respect to Richard. This is a lesson for people like that tourist. The Royal Guard released an official statement, emphasizing, "We stand not only as a symbol of tradition, but also as protectors of the values of our country. Such behavior should not be normalized, and there will be serious consequences for those who cross the line." The fallout? Jack remained the center of attention. Newspapers ran dramatic headlines such as "The Fall of a Proud Karate Champion" and "How Ego and Disrespect Led to Humiliation." Another read, "Richard Hunt, the Hero of the Day." The story became a rallying cry for respecting traditions and those who uphold them. Jack's name turned into a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that even the most confident individuals can falter when they overstep boundaries. The courtroom was packed to capacity. Journalists with notepads and cameras filled every available seat, eager to cover the case already dubbed the Karate Champion Trial. Jack had no escape from the intense scrutiny. He sat on the defendant's bench, shoulders slumped, eyes fixed on the floor. The confidence he had displayed so boldly in front of the crowd was now nowhere to be seen. The judge, a stern elderly man with a serious demeanor, looked over his glasses to survey the room. His voice was firm but steady. "Let us begin the hearing regarding Mr. Jack Randall's assault on a member of the Royal Guard." Jack's lawyer rose, his tone measured as he attempted to soften the situation. "Your Honor, my client's actions were nothing more than an ill-conceived joke. He did not intend to cause harm and did not grasp the seriousness of his behavior." The judge frowned, his gaze settling on Jack. "A joke?" he repeated slowly. "We have video evidence showing your client deliberately crossing boundaries, issuing threats, and attempting to physically strike an individual on duty. That cannot be excused as a joke." A tense silence filled the courtroom. Journalists scribbled furiously, eager to capture every detail. Testimonies and video evidence. Several tourists who had been present during the incident testified as witnesses, each confirming that Jack's actions were intentional. "He was clearly trying to provoke the guard," said a young woman in a sharp business suit. "We all saw him mocking and then attempting to strike." The court was then shown video footage from surveillance cameras and bystanders' phones. The clips displayed Jack raising his leg to kick, only to be brought down swiftly by Richard's impeccable reaction. Murmurs spread through the courtroom, and the judge banged his gavel to restore order. "Your actions were dangerous and disrespectful," the judge said, addressing Jack directly. "You insulted not only an individual, but the traditions that our guards represent." The verdict. After brief deliberations, the judge delivered his sentence. I hereby sentence you to 6 months in prison for assault and public disorder. May this serve as a lesson to you and to others." The verdict was met with mixed reactions in the courtroom. Some applauded, while others whispered amongst themselves, debating the severity of the punishment. Jack sat motionless, the weight of public condemnation evident on his face. Outside the courthouse, journalists and bystanders discussed the outcome. Many supported the decision. "This is the right judgment," said a man in a business suit. "Such antics cannot be tolerated. Respect the traditions." Another shouted. Some, however, felt the sentence was overly harsh, but the majority agreed on one thing. This case sent an important message to anyone thinking they could cross boundaries without consequence. Meanwhile, Richard Hunt resumed his post at Buckingham Palace. His figure, as steady and upright as ever, remained a symbol of the royal guard's unwavering discipline. But now he was more than that. In the eyes of the public, he was a hero, a man who had defended his honor and duty with grace and skill. A journalist standing near the barrier posed a question. "Richard, what did you feel when you were attacked?" He looked straight ahead, his voice calm and resolute. "I did what I was trained to do, protect myself and my service. That's my duty." The story of Jack Randall, the former karate champion, became a universal reminder that disrespecting people and traditions has consequences. His name remained in headlines as a cautionary example of how ego and arrogance can lead to disgrace. Meanwhile, Richard Hunt continued his service, inspiring millions around the world with his resilience and professionalism.